I'm going to take moderator's liberty and skip bios because this is about innovation and insurgency even among the incumbents, and challenge you to do something you might not yet have done, which is use a new tool. Pretty much everyone, with 2 or 3 exceptions, is in a map that is publicly available with full bios based on publicly available information. So if you'd like to know more about these fine gentlemen, you can use a new tool and have a look.
I look like the bad guy in the room, chemical industry. When it comes to sustainability, the chemical industry has changed tremendously in the last 30 years. Do you think that there were chief sustainability officers in chemical companies? I'm going to say 10 years ago to be on the safe side. Maybe I could even say 5 years ago. There is basically in all chemical companies today, certainly the large chemical companies that I know of, tools to assess the sustainability of the portfolio. This is a way to analyze weaknesses and strengths. Don't think that this is something which is just a little baby so that we can write the next sustainability report. This is something that goes directly to the CEO and drives investment decisions, also drives the choice of R&D project. We look through this sustainability portfolio management tool before starting a new R&D project. How is it aligned with our sustainability criteria? I like to describe the situation with a triangle, and with 3 edges of the triangle of equal importance. It's innovation, it's sustainability, and this is global competitiveness. I think Patrick Thomas and Covestro in general show really a strong leadership, speaking now about return on carbon invested. And I think maybe the financial market will change, but today this is the way they are. And we have among our stakeholders, of course, important stakeholders are shareholders, so there must be a business case. And competitiveness is something very important.
So I need to make the case for dinosaur industries, which is super exciting, but I'm going to try and make it as well as I can. Actually, our products in Air Liquide, oxygen and hydrogen, were around long before dinosaurs went extinct. And they should be probably the last ones around when we turn the lights off. So that's our privilege. Let me go quickly through this. We do oxygen and hydrogen and a few other essential molecules. Oxygen is basically used, for those of you who don't know, in combustion processes across industries. Breathing, of course, as well. Comes from air, but uses up a lot of energy when you produce it. As for hydrogen, ideally it would come from water, but it doesn't. Most of it comes from natural gas, thus emitting CO2, and it's used also to clean up fuel precisely, or to actually power cars through fuel cells or even rockets. So how do we address the issue of climate change? First, we start from a societal, environmental standpoint as citizens. I think we've got to be grounded in reality around us. And it's not always easy in big organizations, but it's absolutely vital. So we have to realize that our future as a company, depends on conserving the planet, or at least contributing here and to a better quality of life. That's where it starts. So shareholder value, yes. Happy customers, of course. Motivated employees as well. So we have to act on the climate, and as was said numerous times today, together with many other people, we can't do it on our own. And that's my last slide. It's a bit busy, numbers and challenges. On the left, our footprint. So it's the negative, if you like, what we emit. And on the right is how we'd like to contribute positively to lower emissions. I won't use negative emissions. So you see we've got a pretty heavy footprint, I would say, 25 million tons of CO2. So we're a typical large industrial organization. And that CO2 we emit either to produce oxygen or hydrogen, the products I mentioned, also some cogen units. And the challenges on that left-hand side of things are to green the power supply, and thus we'll have green or blue, however you call it, oxygen in the future. And that, I think, will come relatively quickly. Hydrogen is a more complex issue for us to switch from natural gas to water. That's something we will have to do, but it's taking time. And then the last option we have is to sequester that CO2. And on the good side of things, the contribution, we calculate that we contribute to our customers saving approximately 16 million tons of CO2 every year. And a lot of that has to do with them switching to oxygen processors instead of using air in their combustion. And what challenges do we have there? Well, of course, we've got to come up with more of these low emissions processors. Typical example would be the steel industry. So today, steel makers, when they go the whole integrated steel route, so they use iron ore, and then they use coke, and then they use oxygen. And we're very happy about that, of course, but that emits CO2. In future, you might have other processors, particularly using hydrogen, which would have far less emissions. We just need to work with our customers to get there. Recycle CO2 as a feedstock, and that's something we dream of doing, but which we'll actually do with the chemicals industry. So using CO2 as a feedstock to produce syngas, typically, and you do that by combining your CO2 with clean, affordable hydrogen, and that's on its way. And last point is to contribute to a zero emissions transport sector. Here, what we're promoting very hard is electric vehicles with hydrogen fuel cell capability. And there you've got issues as well. You need to look across your supply chain, how you produce hydrogen in the first place. But this is a very, very promising sector, and we're working very hard on that. So that gives you kind of a balanced image, I think, of the challenges we have ahead of us.
We're just really excited about the journey that we're on as a company and the results that we're achieving. So please bear with me if this rubs you up the wrong way. Since 2006, we have reduced our CO2 emissions by 52%. Towards 2023, we have a target of reducing our CO2 emissions by 96% compared to 2006. The CO2 emission reductions that we have accomplished actually constitute 53% of the total Danish CO2 reductions. And obviously this says a lot about how coal intensive we were back in 2006, but obviously, thankfully, also something about the journey that we've been on. We reduce our CO2 emissions primarily by building offshore wind farms and by converting our power stations to be able to run on certified sustainable biomass. The blue line is the IEA energy sector trajectory for GHG emissions. Our 2023 target, which is 20 grams of CO2 emitted per kilowatt hour produced, is, as you see, well within the boundaries of the Paris Agreement, and we're very proud of that. Our heritage is an oil and gas company. We were established in 1972 as an oil and gas company, so that's why we have the funny name. The funny name remained even when we, in 2005, merged with a number of Danish, very traditional utilities that were running coal-fired power plants. In the following years, our traditional revenue streams slowly eroded, such as wholesale of gas, electricity, etc., and new winds were also blowing, and pardon the pun, because I'll get to wind power in a bit. But the interesting story here is that during the otherwise not so very successful COP15 in Copenhagen, our board was actually in a room deciding whether to invest in a coal-fired power plant in Germany. And the decision was negative. They thought that's not what's going to make us successful in the long run. We want to lead the energy transformation by delivering green, independent, and economically viable energy solutions. So, what have we done? Well, in 2015, we had a 49% renewable energy share in our production. So we're among now the greenest energy companies in Europe, apart from EDP Renewables, which was born as a renewable energy company. We transformed our business, and the symbols here, I'll digest them for you. The top one is oil and gas. The middle one is our Danish traditional conventional power production and our grid, and the last one is our wind power business. So from 2006 to 2016, we transformed the capital employed to focus almost fully on our wind power business. The 16% of our spent on converting the power stations, as I said before, and on flexibility solutions for the grid. For instance, we're installing 1 million smart meters in people's homes that will eventually lead to a more flexible consumption and thus better integration of renewable energy into the grid. We're also expanding internationally from being a very Danish company. We're now much more international. Actually, we've been one of the biggest foreign direct investors into the UK, so a large part of our portfolio is actually in the UK. And thankfully, I think, and a justification for everybody involved, our operating profit has also increased significantly over the years. I just wanted to show you this to give you the bit of scale of our offshore wind efforts. So we are the global leader. We've built 29% of all offshore wind in the world. And as you can see, the other traditional energy companies that are trying to follow suit still have some way to catch up. We are expanding into the US and into Taiwan, where we are currently maturing projects. And that's something that we're very interested in, obviously because it also constitutes interesting challenges for the organization logistically and in terms of understanding new cultures. And I just want to finish with this one because I said I started by talking about our CO2 emissions reduction target. Now, obviously, a large contributor to that is that we have decided to phase out coal completely from our power and heat production from our Danish power stations. So we've already reduced by 73%, but by 2023 we will have reduced 100% down to zero. That's it. Thanks.
My question is, are we doing enough? And what can CEFIC do as an industry association to get the member companies that are moving at different speeds on this subject? How can we get them together to really have these breakthroughs that we know we have the potential to do if we can only partner? And the same it goes in for the technologies of wind energy and other alternatives. Do you partner with blade manufacturers, with turbine manufacturers in order to drive improved efficiency for your energy generation?
And what I see more and more, and this is probably the next step in what we can do to improve our footprint, this is what is called very often industrial symbiosis. This is working not just within the chemical sector, but also with other industrial sectors, so that maybe a byproduct from one sector can become a raw material for another sector. I believe this is the next wave of improvement that we can make. Of course, CEFIC as an association is not taking decisions, but we can be proactive in trying to put the facts on the table, and it is up to the companies then through this to see the opportunities for themselves.
I'll give a quick example of a partnership we're a member of in Germany to launch fuel cell infrastructure in that country. So it's in the field, of course, of clean mobility, transitioning to electric vehicles. And if we want this to go fast enough, given the capital outlay from the start, we had to get 8 partners together, supported by the German government. And we have a plan to roll out 400 stations currently in Germany. We've done about a quarter of that plan so far. Now, of course, our other natural partners will be the car makers, because they need to come with the cars that we can then buy. But that is typically an area where I think the contribution to the issues we're talking about can be massive. But if you really want to get the technology up and running, you can really only do it through this kind of partnership.
Great, thank you.
Partnerships, yes, it's a key word in our business. For instance, with Novo Nordisk, we have a so-called climate partnership, where we support them in reducing their energy consumption. And in total, with our climate partnerships, we have actually reached a total energy efficiency that's the equivalent of the annual consumption of the second largest city in Denmark. So it's an area that we also think is extremely important. And lastly, our continued growth in the wind power business is basically based on partnerships. So the model is that we build and operate it, but as soon as it's there, we bring in investors. We divest 50% of the wind farm in order to allow us to fund continued growth. So basically building new wind farms. So partnership is absolutely key.